Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining tonight's AeHIN Hour. Please be reminded that the microphones are muted throughout the meeting. For comment box, and for questions, please use the questions box. So for this session, we have two speakers. Our first speaker is Ms. Ronwin Cornell, who is a program manager at GMB Health Systems NPC. Having worked in 12 countries, she has extensive experience of implementation design and program management in low resource settings. And also joining us tonight is Mrs. Linda Taylor, who is a product manager at GMB Health Systems and has over 10 years of experience of software and product development in the e-health sector. May we now call on our speakers? Hello, Ms. Ronwin. I think your microphone's on mute.
Hi, sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ronwin Cornell. As Cha said, I'm the project manager for the blood safety program here at GMB. And we're going to talk today a bit about the software and the implementation process that we've gone through while implementing the project in 3 countries so far. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the presentation right. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So we work for GMB Health Systems, which is an African non-profit organization based in South Africa. Our vision is a world in which health systems and information advance global health. And our core competencies include needs assessments and requirements gathering, systems design and solution architecture, software development, implementation and capacity building, and monitoring and evaluation. So I think the best thing to do is to start off with safe blood and why it's important. When we talk about safe blood, we're talking about blood that is free from transfusion transmissible illnesses like HIV, hepatitis, and syphilis, as well as blood that has been blood typed to ensure that transfusions are safe between donors and recipients. Okay, safe blood is important because it has a very high impact on maternal mortality and child mortality in developing countries. So the WHO estimates that 20% of maternal deaths in Africa could be prevented by safe blood, as well as the availability of safe blood having a large impact on survival from children with malaria, as well as anemia and extreme malnutrition. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Linda Taylor, who's going to talk a bit about the BSIS software.
Great. Hi, thanks everybody. So BSIS is short for the Blood Safety Information System, and it was really built on a system that had initially been prototyped by Georgia Tech in the United States. And we basically took some of their learnings, and what we did is we took those fundamentals and we built a production-ready system that really manages information right from the point of donation right up until the point of transfusion. So really a vein-to-vein solution is what we are looking at. And it records information and tracks really 2 important entities. So that is the donor itself and also the blood donation that they give. So one of the core features is that traceability. So being able at any point within that blood safety value chain to be able to determine for a particular unit of blood, who did it come from and what processes has it been through. So included within that is everything that happens within the donor clinic, the donor assessment, the actual donation event itself, right through to the component processing that happens within the blood transfusion lab, where they split the blood into different components. It also goes through the testing processes. So those are two parallel processes, which includes the TTI testing, and there are 4 mandatory tests that BSIS ensures the results are collected for. Those are HIV, hepatitis C, hepatitis B, and syphilis. There is also the possibility of adding in and configuring additional tests should the blood service be doing those. And BSIS is also built around the principles of the AFSBT accreditation process. So AFSBT is the Africa Society for Blood Transfusion Services, and they have a set of guidelines that determine really how a blood transfusion service within Africa or other low resource settings, the sort of good practice principles that they should be following. So BSIS is very much designed around those principles. So things like the TTI testing algorithm that is inbuilt into BSIS is the one developed and promoted by AFSBT. The BSIS also records and then provides information around the pack at the time of labeling. So this is quite a critical control point within the system, whereby BSIS will look at the various component statuses and the various things that have happened to that unit, and will determine whether or not a particular unit of blood is safe to be labeled and then safe to be issued into their inventory. And then again, an additional control point is within the inventory management portion of BSIS, there are processes to ensure that when a unit of blood is issued out to a facility or a clinic, there are again more safety checks that determine whether or not it is in fact safe to be issued. And then the very final piece, which really supports hemovigilance programs, is to be able to record, if that information is actually available to the blood service, which patient received a particular unit of blood, and whether or not there were any adverse events associated with that transfusion. Okay, so 3 of the things that are particularly important in terms of managing information is traceability, which I've sort of mentioned already, and we manage traceability really through the use of 2 unique identifiers, one for the donor and one for the donation itself. Obviously, confidentiality and privacy is extremely important, and so we have quite rigorous and quite granular role-based access. And then there's also clearly the accuracy of the information is very important. And we have a number of checks and balances around data validation that ensures that. And I think I've already mentioned how all of these are really designed to support the stepwise accreditation process. Just to note, it's quite an unusual accreditation process in that there are basically 3 different levels of accreditation. I think it's certification 1, certification 2, and accreditation, as it's recognized that that's just a more practical and realistic way for services to be able to improve their quality management systems. Okay, so here we just have some pictures of the system actually in use. These were taken in the Lesotho National Blood Transfusion Service in Maseru. And we've just got some key pictures there. One of the things that's highlighted is the printing of the label that you can see up on the top right-hand corner there. So BSIS produces this printed label, whereas a lot of services currently actually just have handwritten labels. Obviously, a printed label is much more accurate, much more easily readable, and you don't get things like discrepancies between the collection date and the expiry date that were a problem with handwritten labels. What we also have is an important feature that allows you to verify using a barcode scanner that you have indeed placed the label that you've printed on the correct unit of blood. As you can also see from the pictures, it's a very simple interface. So it's designed to be very simple, very easy to use, as intuitive as possible, and we only really record that data that's absolutely necessary in order to be able to process the blood unit. This is just a summary of the different pieces within the system itself. I've mentioned most of those, but just to say, one of the other things that we have is a reporting mechanism. Both from within BSIS itself, you can produce a number of standardized reports, and then we can also plug into Jasper Reporting, the free version, and from that we also provide a number of different reports. But for facilities that have the in-house capacity, that means they also have the ability, if they have SQL writing queries, to be able to actually develop their own reports. Just very briefly, this is a quick look at the technical architecture. So we utilize a MySQL database. Then we have the service layer using Java Spring and Hibernate. And then the presentation layer, or the UI, is built in AngularJS. And we have plans, although it doesn't currently integrate, you can see it is actually built around an API. So although we don't currently have a use case for integration, we've sort of pre-built that within the architecture to be able in the future to interface with automated testing equipment or other equipment like the scales that are used to weigh the blood bags, and potentially also to integrate with other information systems. Okay, again, just having a look at the BSIS technology. So it's designed to be installed on a relatively low spec server. So the server could just be a high spec laptop. It doesn't have to be a large machine. And it's also designed to work within a local or a wide area network. So it does not require internet access in order to function. Although if it's also possible to deploy it through the cloud, but in all the implementations where we've worked, that's not feasible due to the sort of legal implications. So through the local or the wide area network, the Windows workstations talk to the server, and the use of both barcode scanners is heavily encouraged because it obviously makes for simpler and faster and more accurate data capture. And we also are able to print barcodes and specialist labels using specialist printers. So that's really what's required in terms of the hardware and the infrastructure. Okay, so I'm going to hand over back now to Ronwin to talk us through the implementation process.
Sure, thanks, Linda. So one of the sort of unique things about how we've been implementing BSIS is we've taken a very sort of extended approach to implementation that focuses on not just deployment of the software, but on capacity building around software use, around validation of the software, which is done in line with the global good practices by the International Society for Blood Transfusion, around validation of equipment for blood services. And then we've done a lot of sort of training around other aspects of individuals' work that influence their ability to manage and maintain BSIS. So basic training on network maintenance, server maintenance. We've done train the trainer training so that staff can train others once they've been trained how to use the system. And we've done some basic project management training with the implementation teams in country. But as you'll see from this implementation process, there are numerous streams. There's an initial planning phase that we go through together with the blood services to see whether the system is actually suitable for their environment. They're then responsible for the procurement of hardware and infrastructure. We then work together on a training and deployment schedule, which is accompanied by a validation process, which is led by the blood services using documentation and guides that GMB provides for them, but they actually have to do that themselves. And that comes in 3 parts. There's an installation qualification, where you're looking at how the software is actually deployed and how the workstation, the infrastructure is working. So you check all of that and you sign off that that is all correctly done. There's an operational qualification where the blood service itself takes the specifications of the system and it uses test cases that we provide to ensure that the system does what we as the providers say it will do. And then finally, there's the performance qualification, where the blood services look at the system in terms of how it's operating within their blood service workflows. And there's a lot of work around the revision of SOPs or standard operating procedures that happens as part of this process to ensure that the use of the system is integrated with the other day-to-day activities that they take part in, whether it's the registration of donors or the collection of blood, the testing processes, issuing of components, all of that involves SOP revision and integration between the system and the work that they're doing. So that's very important. We found that with the training, it's one of the critical things is not just to train people on how to use the system, but when to use the system and why to use the system. Okay, so just looking at where BSIS is in operational use at the moment, we're currently operational in 3 sites: the Lesotho Blood Transfusion Service in Maseru, Lesotho, the National Blood Service of Ghana's Southern Area Blood Center in Accra, and the National Blood Bank of Ethiopia's Addis Ababa Center. We're also currently implementing in 2 additional sites. One is the Zambia National Blood Transfusion Services Lusaka Center, and the other, which we will be beginning in October, is the Central Hospital Blood Service in Yaoundé, Cameroon. Just to give some quotes of we've been given from the blood services themselves, which I think demonstrate how well our process has worked, is that everybody has accepted the system at the blood services and agrees that it greatly assists them as staff in the operation of the center. The training teams that we've worked with in country feel that they're very confident and able to maintain BSIS based on the training that they've received, and that when challenges arise, they have the knowledge to formulate solutions themselves. So one of the outcomes of the process that we've used to implement is a very strong sense of ownership within the blood services of the system. And the majority of first level support is done by the teams we've trained at the blood services, which means the level of support that we have to give them is minimal and is generally level 2 support, although the system has been very stable, so we haven't had that many support requests from that perspective. Just to give you a sense of what BSIS in operational use means, at Lesotho, which is our beta test site, they have the smallest number of users and units collected, but they've processed and issued about 7,215 units. The National Blood Center of Ghana's Southern Area Blood Center and the Addis Ababa Center at the National Blood Bank of Ethiopia have far higher volumes of blood coming through the blood services. They're much bigger, and they have issued somewhere between 35,000 and 65,000 units over the last year. So you could estimate that about 100,000 people have been impacted by this system over the last 20 months. So I think that's pretty good. Going forward, what we're working on at the moment is a French version of BSIS, which will be available in August. As I said earlier, we're actively implementing in Zambia and in Cameroon. And our aim for 2018 is to expand our country implementations as well as do additional features like device interfacing and mobile clinic or multi-site support. So that is the activities we're hoping to continue this year, and in order to facilitate that work, we're looking at expanding our funder base. So just a brief acknowledgements. So far, the development of the software and the current implementations have been funded by PEPFAR. We've worked very closely with the American Association of Blood Banks and Safe Blood for Africa, who are technical assistance partners in Lesotho and Ghana, respectively, as well as getting input from other organizations like the Western Province Blood Transfusion Service, the South African National Blood Transfusion Service, and the Africa Society for Blood Transfusion. And that's all for the presentation. I think that takes us to about 20 minutes into the conversation. Does anybody have any questions for us?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Ronwin and Ms. Linda. I'm still waiting for our participants to enter their questions, so maybe we can wait for a few minutes.
Sure.
To our participants, we have a questions box in the GoToWebinar panel, so you can type them there. Or if you cannot find a questions box, you can also type the message in the chat box. Thank you.
Okay, Chai, I don't think there seem to be any questions unless anything's come up on your side.
Yes, there are no questions on my side too, Ms. Ronwin. Maybe our participants can just email in case we wrap up the session.
Yes, sure. They're very welcome to email Linda or I. The best way to get hold of us is to email us on BSIS@gembi, which is JEMBI.org.
I'm trying to type it in the chat box. So is this the correct email address? BSIS@gembi.org.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, thank you. Seeing that there are no questions yet, maybe we can wrap up the session, Ms. Ronwin.
Sure.
Yes, thank you for spending your time with us and for sharing your expertise, and we hope to get some feedback from our participants as well.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for having us.
Thank you, Ms. Ronwin and Ms. Linda.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.